Okay, I love it when it comes up and says you are live because that means our event is beginning. First of all, welcome to everyone who's joining us. You are really in for a treat. Colleen Shogan and Ellen Crosby are two authors who are both entertaining and fascinating to listen to. Earlier this year, Colleen and Ellen teamed up for the release of Ellen's new book, The French Paradox, which was the 11th in her Wine Country Mystery series. And tonight, Ellen returns the favor as we celebrate the release of Dead as a Duck, the latest in Colleen's Washington Whodunnit Series, which came out just last week. In Dead as a Duck, Congressional staffer Kit Marshall is really looking forward to a much-deserved summer vacation in the Outer Banks. But when the mayor of the beach town turns up dead, Kit and her friends need to put their fun on hold to help solve the crime. And one thing I just, particularly thought of while reading that description is that it's clear that if you are the protagonist or the sleuth in a mystery series or the author, no vacation is ever really relaxed. No matter where you go, something is going to happen. Colleen has been reading mystery since she was 6, and she conceived of the plot of her first novel one morning while taking a walk in her suburban DC neighborhood. A political scientist by training, she's taught American politics at numerous universities, has worked on Capitol Hill as a legislative staffer in the United States Senate and as a senior executive at the Library of Congress. Currently, she's the senior vice president at the White House Historical Association. With titles like Stabbing in the Senate, Homicide in the House, and Larceny in the Library, I think that the White House Historical Association might be the site of an upcoming book. I'm just saying that's what it seems like to me. I'm noticing a definite trend here. Ellen Crosby is a former reporter with the Washington Post and foreign correspondent for ABC Radio. Her last job as a stringer was as a regional feature writer for the Washington Post, covering many of the places where her wine country mysteries are set. Earlier this year, as I mentioned, The French Paradox, the 11th of her Wine Country Mysteries, was released. And she's also the author of the Sophie Medina Mysteries and Moscow Nights. As I said, we're going to be talking about Dead as a Duck tonight, Colleen's new book. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box and we'll answer them at the end. I'm going to drop myself out and leave you with Colleen and Ellen, and welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So now the shoes on the other foot, and I get to ask you questions about your books.
Right. Yeah, usually I'm the one asking questions. I don't know if I like this so much, so it's different.
I like this. I like interviewing. It's so much fun because you get, people end up telling you things that I think usually something comes out that's surprising. So we'll see where this goes tonight. So I'm going to start off. The rest of the series is set in Washington, D.C. So why did you choose to move the story to North Carolina, to Duck? What made you do that?
Right. This is the 7th book in the series. And so I've written 6 books before, and all of them had something to do with Capitol Hill or other landmarks in Washington, D.C. So it's a very DC-centric series. And I vacationed in the Outer Banks for as long as I've lived in the Washington, D.C. area, my husband and I. And recently we bought, before the pandemic, actually, a small house in the Outer Banks. And it just seemed like everybody from Washington, D.C. goes on vacation. One of the most popular places is the Outer Banks. I always wanted to write a beach-based mystery. So it made a lot of sense to move the characters from Washington, D.C. to the Outer Banks for a vacation. And, my protagonist, is really hardworking, so she deserves a vacation. And it seems, like poetic justice when she finally does get a vacation that a dead body shows up and she's back in the swing again.
Yeah, it's, and it's hard to take a vacation when you're working on the Hill. I actually got married during a Senate recess because I knew that it wasn't going to be in session. So
that's right.
Yeah. So is your house in Duck?
Yes, our house is in Duck, right in the thick of the town, right there in the middle of it that you drive through. And we're just, really delighted to have it. And we did use it a lot the past year and a half, of course.
Was that the house in your book, or is it different? You made it.
No. The house that we own is much smaller than the house that I put in the book. And really what I based this idea on was when we started going to the Outer Banks, many years ago, we went with groups of friends and we rented, huge homes that had 4, 5, 6 bedrooms. And there was always, a pool, and you were near the beach and all kinds of things, a hot tub. It was just a lot of fun. And actually, I had a friend a few years ago when I was writing my books, and he said to me, Colleen, you should write one. He just said, you should write one of the books based upon all the vacations that we spent at the Outer Banks, because there's all these people in a house together. I think he was thinking more like the murder would happen in the house, but he just thought that would be a great setting for a story for one of my books. And I kind of thought about that. I thought, well, that's an interesting idea. I've always kind of want to write something at the beach, and I could kind of use those vacations as a basis for the framework of what would happen in this novel.
Well, it's so clear you know the place so well. I mean, there's just so much, everything, the food and the, all the venues and everything. But this brings me to my next question. So Duck has a real mayor, and the person who's murdered in the book is the mayor of Duck. Like, did you have this conversation with him, or, do you know him, or you just bumped off the mayor of Duck?
Yeah, I don't know the mayor, although I've talked to several people in Duck who do know the mayor. So, he is alive. Yeah, he's alive. He's an actual living person. There's a town council in Duck, just like in the book. And there is a mayor who leads the town council. But I will say that the character, Ronan Godfrey, who is the mayor of Duck, who ends up becoming the murder victim very early in the book, is a completely fictional character. I just, gave him a really kind of weird and interesting background. He has nothing to do with the poor man who is actually the mayor of Duck, totally made up a different character, just happens to be occupying the same position. I will say, however, the meeting area, the meeting room where a lot of things happen, like the town council area, municipal center, is really at the heart of Duck. And people will be very familiar with that building who vacation there.
I wonder, as the book comes out, how many people are going to say, is that me? Because it sounds like there's a lot of verisimilitude in this book, and they think that they're this person or that person or whatever. So that'll be really interesting. So another question for you, in Dead as a Duck, we talked about this, we had a chat a couple days ago and went over what we were going to talk about. So everybody in Kit's world has a decision to make that's going to change their life. Her brother comes down to the beach house with him, and he's there with his girlfriend, her best friend Meg, who's in all the books with her, and her boyfriend, and also Congresswoman Mae Dixon, who's deciding if she's going to run for the Senate or not. So even her husband Doug is pondering the subject matter of his next book. So I said to you, the lone exception is Kit. And was that a conscious decision? And what was your thinking behind it? And you had a really interesting answer for me. So tell me about that.
Right. There's I think 2 parts to that answer. The first thing is there's so many subplots, there's so many things going on with the other characters. And that's a conscious effort on my part, because when my series went on, when I was going to write more than 3 books and then more than, 6 books in the series. And this, Ellen, is someone who's writing, has just published her 11th book in the wine country mystery. You have to make your characters interesting. They have to change or have, conflicts or issues they have to resolve that are interesting to readers, that keep them motivated to want to read more about your characters. I really don't like, just as my own personal pet peeve, I don't like series that go on and the characters don't change in appreciable ways, because that's not really true to life. I mean, let's face it, everybody's lives change over time, and they're confronted with issues they have to solve or deal with. And so in this, I make a conscious effort in most of my books to have the characters that surround Kit have subplots that are continuing and moving on. And it's certainly apparent in this book. Yes. Now, so my editor did say, because there's so much going on, maybe Kit should be a little bit more like the Rock in this book. She's the one that's listening to everybody deal with their problems and trying to help them solve what's going on, and of course trying to solve the murder at the same vein. But the truth really is that Kit's coming to a crossroads too, because her boss is in the House of Representatives. She represents a district in North Carolina, but she's up and coming, and she wants to run for Senate in North Carolina. There's going to be a open Senate seat, and she wants to run for it. And so the reason why they're actually in on a coastal community in North Carolina is that her boss is, engaging in this exploratory campaign. And you're very familiar with this, when candidates say they're not really running yet, but they're exploring whether they're going to run. So her boss is on this exploratory campaign, meeting with voters in North Carolina to try to understand whether they might support her for a Senate run. And so Kit is really affected by this, because if her boss runs for Senate, that means Kit's life is going to change in a major way.
Mm-hmm. And talk a little bit, talk a little bit about how that will change, because we've both been Senate staffers, and in the Senate, you get 6 years, but in the House, you no sooner win and you get back and you're ready to take a breath and everything else when you're running again. So the House is pretty much nonstop. So talk a little bit about, the life of a Hill staffer and how that change affects you.
Right. And so I've heard from, a number of readers who have stuck with me on the other books, and they're really surprised by this, because they thought that congressional staff had more permanency in their jobs, that there was more of a guarantee for employment. But when you work for a member of Congress, whether you work for a member in the House or if you work for a senator, your career is tied intimately to that person's political career and the decisions that he or she makes. And Kit finds herself in this situation. She's not really sure whether Mae Dixon will win a Senate seat in North Carolina. It's kind of, it's a long shot when you try to run for Senate. She's not really sure if she'll win. And if she doesn't win, then Kit knows that her job in the House of Representatives will go away. And this will upend her career yet again. And she's been through a couple of these already throughout the storyline. So, I really want to try to explain to people, particularly outside Washington, D.C., who understandably don't know about really the rhythms and really the uncertainty that a lot of people who work on Capitol Hill or work in politics in general in Washington, D.C. have to live with, because really the outcomes are not anything that you can control. You can participate in the outcomes, but you can't control them. So you really are more of the victim of fate or circumstance than anything else.
Right. When I started working for my boss, this was a very long time ago, but he was running for Senate. And what, I think what they also may not understand is you can't be on the staff of paid by the government and the campaign. So they peel off a lot of the senior aides who know the senator or the congressman or congresswoman or whatever intimately, and they go on the campaign staff, and you have this sort of weird dichotomy all of a sudden, and then so they don't hire anybody new, and so there's fewer people doing more work, and it's a real stressful time.
Very stressful time. I worked during the Senate campaign, and it was very weird, because in my office, and some people, worked, including myself, would do things on a volunteer basis. So you would do things in the evening, or you would take days off, and then you would go on the campaign for a while. And it was just, you're playing like you're, 2 hats, 2 roles, 2 jobs. Other people leave the office, like you said, they quit temporarily, and they go full time on the campaign. So you have that contingent. Mm-hmm. And this is what Kit's thinking. If my boss decides she's going to run for Senate, then am I going to need to quit my job and then go work for the campaign? And if I have to do that, do I have to move to North Carolina temporarily? Does that mean I have to leave my husband and my dog and everything that, my own family, my own life, and my brother, who is a new character to the series that I introduced in the 5th book of the series. So there's a lot of things that are going on in her mind in the background that there's commentary about. But there's nothing she can do about it, because she's not the decision maker, right? Her boss is the one that's going to make the decision.
Right. I remember when my boss won, he was one of 3 Democrats who won, and the Senate turned Republican. And they had a rule, and this is before your time, but they had a rule back then. The majority had 2 staffers for every minority staff person. So when the Senate flipped, the Republicans got to hire to double their staff, and the Democrats halved who they had. And so, even though my boss won, I'll never forget the talk that he called us all in, and he said, "Does anybody want to volunteer to leave? You know, thank you." And then it got down to, "I'm going to have to make some decisions, and I'll call you." So he won, but a lot of people still got let go.
Yeah.
And it's brutal. And, you know, we just bought our first apartment, and it's like, are we going to pay the mortgage, the rent, you know, the mortgage? But it's tough. So when you started writing the series, did you know that there'd be this many, or did you know there'd be more? Did you have a big arc, or how did that work?
No, actually, I mean, when I started with the first book, Stabbing in the Senate, which was a while ago, I really just wrote the book kind of on a whim or on a lark. I mean, I came up with the idea. I hadn't written fiction before, and decided to really just to try to write the story. And the whole goal in my own mind, because I didn't know anything about publishing, I didn't know anything about contracts or how things are sold or anything related to the business of writing. I really just thought, I'm going to write this one book, and it's going to be really cool. It's a standalone book, Stabbing in the Senate, and it's going to be about this woman, Kit Marshall, who solves the mystery of who killed her boss in the Senate, and that's it. And you know, done. And I've written a mystery, and that's really a cool thing to do. And I'll go back to writing all my nonfiction books and articles and all those things. And then when I started. Then once you've completed a manuscript, and if you really are serious about publishing it, you start to go into organizations like Sisters in Crime or other organizations, and go to conferences, and you start to talk. Okay, you might start to talk to agents, or you talk to other people like yourself who have published books before. And I quickly learned that probably I was going to have to sign a contract for that type of mystery for at least 3 books. Like it was going to be 2 or 3 books would be the contract. And I would have to commit to writing a couple more books with those characters, or else, some agents will try to sell a standalone book, but it can be very, very difficult, particularly in the amateur sleuth, traditional mystery, cozy mystery type of world. And when I was able to find my agent, that was the first thing she said. She said, "Well, I need to know what books 2 and 3 are going to be about."
Yeah.
I got sort of an idea for book 2, and then I had to quickly come up with an idea for book 3, because that had to go in the pitch, right, for any publishers, anybody who might be interested in the book. So that was really an awakening to me. I didn't know that would be something that I was required to commit to even see the first book published. And then, after you've written 3, then it somehow went to, I think I did a standalone contract for 4. And then I did another contract for 5 and 6, and now I'm contracted for 7 and 8. So, it kind of has a life of its own, because the characters, you develop an alternate world and a fictional universe that becomes your own to write stories about.
Has it gotten easier as you know the characters better? Can you write, say, faster, maybe?
Yes, I've written all of my books. I've gotten faster pretty much every time. I mean, certainly the first book took the longest. That took me a couple of years to write that book, because I really, truly did not know what I was doing. So I had to go back to books and reread books and say, okay, so when does these things happen, and how many clues do I need to have, and how many suspects do I need to have, and how many false clues or red herrings do I need to have? How do I write dialogue? How much dialogue versus description? I really went back to books that I liked reading and consulted with them, and then tried to imitate those styles.
Right. So which brings me to another question. I mean, you have this job at the White House Historical Association. You teach at Georgetown. You have a lot of outside interests. You're involved in the Women's Suffragette, the Centennial, and I mean, you're just a very, very busy lady. So when do you find time to write?
Right. So I don't feel so bad about this, because recently, Jake Tapper, who's on CNN, he's written a couple really great popular novels. So I've read a lot of interviews with Jake Tapper, and he kind of does somewhat of what I do. He says he writes as few as 15 minutes a day. I probably am not that short, about 15 minutes. But I try to, when I'm writing, I try to commit to either a half hour, 45 minutes to an hour, in the and I write in the evening mostly because that's when I feel like I'm able to do it. And I get as much done as I can in that, limited time frame. And then I move on and I write scene by scene. So I know exactly when I'm done. And I leave little notes for myself at the end of the manuscript because whenever I pick it back up, I want to know, oh, this is what I was thinking. If I had another hour to write, this is what I would have written. So I make a little note for myself. So the next time I open the document, I'm able to pick right up from where I left off. I think I agree with Jake Tapper. He said it's better to write more consistently, shorter periods of time rather than sporadically longer periods of time. And I think I find that I agree with him on that.
Do you write on weekends?
Yeah, sure. I write on Saturdays and Sundays if I have time. And, what I will do, I'm a really early riser. So I'll get up early in the morning, I'll exercise, get my coffee, and I can write for an hour or two and, nobody else is up, and I've already done everything I need to do for the day. And it's 10 o'clock in the morning. And then I'm ready to go out and have fun or do what else, needs to be done for the day. So on the weekends, I'm really disciplined about the morning, but in the weekdays, I can't do that because I got to go to work. So I end up doing things a lot of times in the evening.
Do you ever think about it on your lunch hour? I know David Baldacci said that, when he was working as a lawyer, it's like lunch hour is fair game, so, type a little bit.
No, I don't write when I'm at work. I find it really hard to disengage from my work mode into my writing mode. I need to kind of make that mental break. But I will say this, I have, on my iPhone or whatever, you have that little notes function. And if sometimes when I'd be driving into work or have a, moment to myself, I think about something and say, oh, I should add that. That's a really good idea. That's what I want to do in the book, or I want to change this way. And then I'll just make a note for myself on my iPhone to remind myself, because otherwise I'll forget it.
Right. And
then later in the day, then I can look at my iPhone and remind myself of the brilliant thought that I had earlier in the day,
Yeah, I'm a paper person. I write it down on paper. I just have little notebooks I carry. So the ending came as a surprise to me. The whole way through, I was like, who did it? And I didn't get it until it was revealed. So did you know who did it from the very beginning, or did that sort of evolve? Or
I always know who did it from the beginning. And I think this gets to really another part of the answer to the question you asked before, which is, how does someone who's busy, how do you actually get the writing done? And I outline, my books before I write them. I'm not quite as intricate as some people. I've heard Jeff Deaver talk about it. I took a class once with, a whole week-long class with Laura Lippman. She kind of, plots things out almost scene by scene and keeps track of the characters, which are in every scene. And she color codes the characters on a big storyboard. So then she can look and say, oh, there's too much pink, or there's not enough blue. So she knows that she doesn't have enough of one character or too much of another character, which I think is really it's a fascinating idea. I'm not quite that disciplined, but I do write a long outline, 7, 8, 9 pages that goes. My stories all take place over the course of 4 to 5 days usually. And I plot them out day by day, and I actually give the days of the week a name. This is Monday, this is Tuesday, Wednesday. So it just gets into my own mind. Sometimes it has to do with the congressional schedule because I know on a Friday, there's not going to be as many people in Congress. So I have more, ability to have her do crazy things because there's not as many people and not as many meetings, things like that. So I kind of used the week to plan out the mystery and really go interaction by interaction or scene by scene. And so I go to write, then I can just open that outline and I can say, okay, where am I at? And this is, I'm wrapping up this part, this scene, this conversation, this interrogation that Kit has had. And I've got a transition and I'm moving her to another location and I've got to write that portion of the book. And it really makes things go faster because, if you only have 45 minutes, you know what you need to write when you sit down.
Well, what happens if the writing doesn't go the way of the outline? Do you change the outline? Do you go back and fix it? What do you do? Or does that ever happen?
That's happened once in one of my books. And in one of my books, I was actually, this is a crazy story. I was watching that Sherlock Holmes mystery that was it on CBS or ABC? It was with Lucy Liu. Yeah. And I liked that show. I thought it was good. And I thought it was a clever adaptation of Sherlock Holmes. And I was watching this episode. I love to watch mysteries on TV, by the way. I watch them all the time. And that really helps me because I'll pick up little things here and there that are great. And I was watching this one episode, and it was such a bait and switch. Like, I was certain that I knew who did it. I was certain. And then the whole thing switched around, and it was someone else who had actually, committed the crime or done the murder. And I was like, wow, that was the most clever, a reversal that I've seen in a long time. And then I realized the book that I was writing was, what if I wrote it the way that I was writing it? But I did a bait and switch at the end, and I switched who actually was if I had been building it this way, but really there was a twist at the end, and there was someone else who had actually committed the murder. And so that's what I did. I switched it up, and that was the only time I ever switched the murderer. And it was because of that Sherlock Holmes episode that I watched.
See, it happens to me a lot. So I end up going back and changing. I write in scenes. And so, and then I figure out where my chapters will be. But if at the end of the day, the scenes if I've written something that doesn't jive with what I've got on the paper, I go back and change the outline. And I do that a lot. I really do. Do you write multiple drafts, or do you go back and edit, or what do you do?
Yeah, I write one draft all the way through. So, from start to finish. And then it's kind of fun because then I go back and I read the whole thing. And, sometimes there's, obviously there's holes, or there's the biggest thing, inconsistencies, especially the way that I write, which is a little disjointed. So there's inconsistencies. So I keep track of those inconsistencies on a little piece of paper because I have to then go back and fix them. And they can be stupid things. They could be, things that are really integral to the plot. Oh, that doesn't make sense. I have to fix that. Or people are going to wonder, you're not making sense here. And other cases, they're really, insignificant. You would think details like the color of someone's hair, but actually people will get angry about that if you switch someone's hair color in a book or something like that. And so I keep track of those small details. And, that's kind of a fun part of the process when I actually go back and read the whole book from start to finish. And I say, so what do you think? Is it good? Do I need to make some changes? Do I need some improvement on this character's development, that character's development? And then, I let myself have, at least a month to go back and make some changes and think about the book. And then when I'm really satisfied with it, I send it to my agent, and my agent and her team will do a read before we send it to the publisher.
Yeah, does anybody else read it besides your agent before you turn it into your editor?
No, on the early books, I did have like a group of good friends who are also mystery readers. And, I really trusted them, particularly before the first book and even the second book for sure. And I wanted people that would tell me, I was certain would tell me,
honestly,
if it just wasn't, or if there was a problem, like, it's good, but there's a problem here, right? This doesn't make sense to me, or maybe you should need to do a little bit more here or there. And so on the early books, I did have that, but since I've moved along, now I usually just work with my agent. But then my editor, has really been with me throughout the whole series, and she knows the characters, I would say, pretty much as well as I do at this point. And she's pretty tough on me, not so much on usually the development of the mystery. So you would say like the plot, but more about the character development. So she will really push me on those types of things.
Does your husband read them at all at any point? I mean, before or? Yeah,
he's read most of the books, and he will, he'll read them and he'll say, "Oh, it's great. It's so interesting." And, he goes through them, and he likes the characters. I think he gets really angry. He thinks that that Kit's husband, Doug, is based upon him, but it's really not. So he gets really frustrated about that, because when I make Doug do like kind of, dumb things, or he, he's not behaving the way that maybe my husband thinks he should behave. I don't know. That he gets really upset by it. He's like, "You're making me look like a dolt." I said, "It's not you. It's some other person. It's a fictitious person. It's not you." So
I thought I killed him in Moscow Nights. He said, "On page 3, he's dead." And it's like, that's not you. It was definitely not you. So, it's another person. Yeah, I get there. Both of us have worked on the Hill. We both worked on the Senate. We talked about this. So how much of Kit's life as chief of staff to a congresswoman is drawn from your own experience, and any reason for choosing somebody from the House rather than the Senate, which to me is a totally different kettle of fish?
It is. So the problem was, when I started stabbing in the Senate, I killed Kit's boss. And so he was dead. I mean, within the first 5 pages, of stabbing in the Senate. Right. So that puts Kit in a difficult position right there, because, when your boss is dead, it doesn't matter if your boss is dead or he loses or whatever, he doesn't run again, you're still out of a job.
Right.
So Kit, part of stabbing in the Senate is Kit trying to figure out, oh no, so this is very earlier in her career, about how she's going to find another job. And she ends up taking a position in the House of Representatives with a newly elected member of Congress, because that's basically what she can get. I mean, that's available to her. And she decides to take a risk on this woman named Maeve Dixon, who's a global war on terror, Iraq, Afghanistan war veteran in her, late 30s, who becomes a member of Congress from North Carolina. And so Kit takes a chance and goes and works for her. And then Maeve Dixon kind of caught on. People like that character. She's in a lot of the books, I think almost all of them. She's never a major character. She's always kind of a background character. And so I just decided to stick with Maeve Dixon in the House. And quite frankly, I mean, it was fun writing the book in the Senate. And I love the Senate. But in the House, there's all kinds of crazy people. I mean, there's more of a cast of characters in the House than there is in the Senate. And you got all kinds of things happening over there. So you have a little bit more license to be creative.
I didn't think about that. I was wondering if you thought you wished you'd written Homicide in the House first, you killed off their boss from the House, and then she gets the job in the Senate. But yeah, I can see that. The House is a different kettle of fish for sure. So many more people and so much more going on. Over the course of the series, has anything surprised you about Kit that you didn't expect, that, how she developed? Or?
Well, I mean, I think, a lot of people look at Kit and they think that, I'm writing basically an autobiography, which I'm really not. Kit takes a lot of risks that I would never take personally. She's much more impetuous than I ever would be. She confronts people, when faced with trying to track down killers, she ends up, really putting herself sometimes and maybe even others in danger. I think, but Kit, over time, like I said, it's important for me for the characters to change in substantive ways. Over time, when I look back at stabbing in the Senate, and for a reason, I went back and looked at it again as I was working on my 8th book. She's really unsure of herself in stabbing in the Senate. She's really uncertain, and it's reflected. It made a lot of sense, because she was just a legislative assistant in the Senate. She was just a junior staffer, only worked there for a few years, just basically starting out in her Washington, D.C. career. And by the time, you get to Dead as a Duck, she's a chief of staff for a congressional member who's actually a chair of a committee. Maeve Dixon becomes a chair of a committee unexpectedly.
Which is a big deal.
Which is a big deal, because she's a rising star, right?
The leadership that I think a lot of people don't know that either, that she's making decisions and she's meeting with the speaker and, they're deciding the agenda. So that's a very big deal.
Right. And so Kit's star is really risen along with Maeve Dixon's. And also she solved all these crimes along the way, right? She's,
Did you know she was that aggressive about solving the crimes? I mean, there are sort of some sleuths who, it's sort of more gentle. But I mean, she makes no bones in this book about I'm gonna solve this and I'm gonna do it, and we're we're not gonna vacation till this is done and dusted, and I'm gonna do it. And she even kind of, she doesn't quite go around the chief of police, but she goes around the chief of police. She's very forthright about that. And so talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, very different than when she started out, when she was much more hesitant. In Stabbing in the Senate, she investigates the crime because she becomes the main suspect, right? And the press zeroes in on her because she's the one that discovered the body. So she automatically becomes the main suspect. And she feels like, if I don't clear my name, I'm never going to work on Capitol Hill or in Washington, D.C. again. So she has a real intense personal motivation to solve the crime. And then in all of the books, I try to at least write for some reason. There's something that's motivating her besides the need for justice, besides, catching the killer, which is, of course, now part of Kit Marshall's ethos. There's always a reason for her that spurs her into investigating. And in Dead as a Duck, of course, her brother, Sebastian, becomes the prime suspect for the murder. And she feels, really that she has to clear Sebastian or he's going to get improperly railroaded as the out-of-town vacationer for the crime. And, that's really her motivation for trying to solve this.
Right. So is the 8th book coming out next year?
Yes, it will. Capital Crimes will come out probably this time next year. That'll be the 8th book in the series. That's the 8th book. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, that's okay. And then will there be a 9th one?
Well, at this point in time, I'm planning for Capital Crimes to be the last book in the series. And, you always think that, things could change, but right now, Capital Crimes is drafted as the conclusion of the Kit Marshall saga, which I'm really excited about because I think I've given, with the draft of the book that's completed, I think I've given the characters a really good ending, and particularly Kit Marshall, who really does come full circle.
Oh, no. This is
on your computer.
I have two of my 3 sons are home, one from Germany, and this is the middle son calling to do FaceTime with everything. And I thought I shut off everything. I shut off my phone, but obviously I didn't shut off my computer. So, pardon me. I'll talk to him later. Anyway. Yeah, I think it's, hard when the series comes to an end, but I think also as a writer, you want to keep growing. I have 2 more questions. One is, Harlequin bought your books. So yeah, talk about that. I saw the covers. They're really cool. They're totally different from, your current publisher. And what's with that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. This goes back to the business of writing. A small publisher in Seattle, Camel Press, which is part of a larger publisher called Coffee Town. They are the publisher of the Kit Marshall books. And they published the book in what was shown in the beginning in trade paperback, right? This is, a trade paperback book, and also in ebook, which is great. But, there are other ways in which you can get your book out there. There's obviously audiobooks, there's mass market paperback, there's large print. And I've been really fortunate that Harlequin showed an interest early on in my series, and they've republished the books in mass market paperback for their worldwide mystery imprint. Not too many people realize that Harlequin publishes mysteries, but they do. And they have a very, very active book club at Harlequin where people get 3 or 4 books a month when they join the book club. And my book is part of their book club program. So it goes out to thousands and thousands of people, which is really great because I have, you publish the book, you get some feedback from the traditional and cozy mystery community. But then probably about a year to 2 later, the book comes back out again in mass market paperback. And I get a whole other set of readers who have read the book through Harlequin, which is great.
Any comments from any readers that have surprised you, or anything at book signings that people have said that have any funny stories?
Well, I think the weirdest story I ever had was I was doing this wasn't with Con Lahane, although I did one book talk with Con Lahane in Pittsburgh. But this was, I think, just
Pittsburgh too. Yeah. So go ahead.
Yeah, this was, I think, at Mystery Bookstore in Pittsburgh, which is a really great mystery bookshop right outside of Pittsburgh. And I grew up in Pittsburgh, so that's why I was doing the event there. And I had a number of people that I knew were in the audience, which was great, including my dad. But friends from high school came, and some of their family, and people. It was very supportive, except that one of my really good friends, her aunt, who was kind of funny, she's like kind of a little off the wall. She said, "Colleen, I really like your books." I think this was after the second or third book. She said, "I really like your books." She said this in the crowd. I mean, there was about 50 people there. She said, "But there's just not enough sex in the books. You really need to add more sex in the books." And I said, "Well, Judy, they're not those types of books. They're not. That's just not the type of writer that I am, and that's not the type of books they are." She said, "They'd sell better if you had more sex in them."
And your father said,
I look over, my dad is just, he's like shaking his head. He's really angry, he said.
That's really funny. That's hilarious. So my last question is, so you were talking about writing fiction and nonfiction. Do you, and I do this too, but do you feel like you use different muscles when you write fiction and nonfiction? And since you write nonfiction all day, how hard is it for you to, turn it off and turn on your, like, I can make it up, it doesn't have to be, and I mean, how hard is that? Because I've talked to some other journalists, for example, and it's a trick.
Yeah. I find it a relief. I mean, even today, I spent most of, half the day in the morning writing. I'm writing a short article for the White House Historical Association on the history of the vice presidency, and also the history of one observatory circle where the vice president lives.
Right.
So, I'm trying to, and actually turns out the history of the vice presidency and the growth of power in the vice presidency, dovetails really nicely with talking about the fact that there becomes an official residence in the 1970s for the vice president. So that's what I did most of the day today. But I love being able to switch gears and then put on my fiction hat, because I find it really liberating and I guess freeing to not, like today, all I was doing, and you can see I have all my books like sitting over here, right? Look at everything is, and I'm just going back and forth, checking sources, and I'm obviously footnoting everything. I write, you literally write sentence by sentence to make sure you're getting everything right. I spent almost an hour today trying to find the origins of a quote about the vice presidency, to make sure I had it nailed down. And, that's fun. And I like that type of research and that type of work, but that's not that, you're constrained in a way when you write nonfiction. You have to be extraordinarily careful to make sure, at least I feel like, to make sure I get everything right and I'm documenting everything. Right. And when I write fiction, we've talked about how you have to be consistent and you have to be careful, but I can, make people say crazy things. I can make them, tell jokes. I can, sometimes a conversation, I'm not really sure what Kit and Meg are going to talk about over happy hour. In every one of my books, they go to happy hour together, every one of them. it's over a glass of wine. They have a discussion, or, their favorite wine is Prosecco. So they're always talking over Prosecco. And I never, kind of know like what exactly they're going to say to each other in these conversations that's going to be entertaining and funny. And I just find that that creative side to be, just really freeing and liberating. And it's a totally different side of my brain and my writing, talent, or that writing a part of your brain that you're allowed to exercise. And I actually think it makes you a better writer overall, the fact that you can do both.
Yeah. What do your colleagues think of it? The Library of Congress and at the White House, the Historical Association. Has anybody said anything? Or
I was really lucky, particularly at the Library of Congress, obviously a place that, prizes authors and books. Everyone at the Library of Congress was very, very supportive of the books, including the librarian, Dr. Carla Hayden, who was she was actually one of my early readers of Larceny in the Library. There was no way I was going to publish that book without the Librarian of Congress, reading it and making sure she was okay with it. Yeah. So both Dr. Hayden and her chief communications officer, who was a friend of mine, they both read an early draft of the book before it was edited, because I wanted them to give me any feedback on it, any changes they wanted me to make sure that I portrayed the library correctly and fairly and in a way in which they thought would best promote and help the institution. And they had very, very few suggestions and edits. And they both of them have been two of my biggest proponents, particularly for that book. And she also gave me the good idea in this book and in Larceny. I introduced a new dog character. Of course, Kit has a very popular character, Clarence. He's her beagle mutt that kind of gets involved in a lot of the mysteries in really fun and unique ways. And I happened to be talking to Dr. Hayden before I wrote Larceny in the Library. And I said, I'm having trouble with Clarence. And she said, well, what's wrong with Clarence? I said, well, I'm running out of dog plots for him. Like, there's only so many ways that dogs can help solve a mystery. You know what I mean? Like I'm not going to have him talk or anything like that. No, it's got to be like a dog, right? And he can, he's limited, ability to kind of interact as a character. And she said, she said, just give him a friend, give him a Capitol Police dog friend that he can interact with, and they can go on adventures together, and maybe the police dog can help him solve the mystery. And I was like, that's genius. Like, that's perfect. Like, I never thought of that. She said, yeah, there you go. And so that's how I created Murphy, and Murphy became Clarence's friend, starting in Larceny at the Library. And Murphy also plays a pretty big part in Dead as a Duck as well.
Right. There's a guy seeing the comments over here from Eileen. Running out of dog plots is not a common issue you hear about from authors.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. So we are 3/4 of an hour along. So Eileen, I know you're out there because you.
Yeah, I was going to jump back in because well, I wanted to follow up on something that I think we didn't get into the discussion of because somebody was trying to FaceTime with you, Ellen, but you said, Colleen, that Capital Crimes is the last book in your Washington Whodunnit series. Do you have something else that you're going to start up after that? Or are you going to go back to more nonfiction, or you're just going to kind of enjoy not having a deadline for a little while?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I'm going to enjoy not having a deadline for a little bit of a while, but I am not ready to talk about anything right now, but I do have a really good idea for another, I guess you could say, amateur sleuth mystery series. It would also be set in Washington with totally new characters. Mm-hmm. And I think it would be, I think a lot of people will find it very, very interesting. So, and a lot of fun. And it, you said, Ellen, you kind of said the White House needs to be part of this. And I think you're probably right. So, I do have a really good idea for a set of characters, and we'll see where that goes. I haven't written any of the books. I have an idea, at least, of the first book and its plot. So I think in the next 6 months or so, I'm going to take it easy a little bit, but I'm going to start getting some of those ideas down on paper, and we'll see where it goes.
Well, so the White House Historical Association, I think you and I talked about this, is not part of the White House, and it has nothing to do with who's the president. But do you spend a lot of time at the White House?
In normal, non-COVID times, right, we absolutely do. In the public rooms of the White House, not in obviously the private rooms of the White House, but on the ground floor and the state floor of the White House, what is commonly known as the public area of the White House. We do, spend time there, take people, show them around, tours, interact with, events that are going on there. So it is something that we're looking forward to. The White House is still closed, and we're looking forward. We hope that it'll be open maybe sometime this fall.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah. So
I was going to say, both of you have series that have run for a number of, books, which, I mean, is wonderful. But I wonder, as an author, do you feel, the people that love your books want you to keep writing those books? We love those series. And do you ever feel like, well, obviously, Colleen, you have decided that this is it. I'm ready to do something different. But, do you get pressure from your readers or from your publisher that they want you to just keep on the same course that, you've been on because, it's a known quantity and there already is a market for it?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, if your series has gone that long, you probably have created a dedicated readership for it. So, you do have encouragement, and I find that to be, reassuring that you have encouragement from your publisher or your agent to keep writing that series. I just kind of felt like there was a natural endpoint for these characters. I had really, I'm like I said, once again, I'm kind of fixated on the fact that I want them to change in interesting and new ways. And, once I would hit the point where I wouldn't be able to come up with new and interesting ways for them to change, then it might just be time for their story to to be the natural ending. And I also think that it's exciting to think about coming up with a whole new set of characters and new plot points and, maybe new settings that can take you, in different places as a writer.
As a non-writer, I would think that is very freeing after, as you write each book and you develop your characters, at a certain point you have, had them as you had with, Clarence, you need to do things to change things, change things and keep things fresh, allow them the opportunity to grow. And you have to keep all that in mind each time you write a book. But when you start a new series, it's almost like it is a clean slate with everything. So I would find that very freeing if it were me.
Yeah.
I'm excited. Your Harlequin, deal, I find fascinating. Are they going to have, with the book clubs that they do they have you come and speak with, as part of the book clubs, or are they more that people get the book, not that there's a discussion of the book?
There's not really. I think their book club program is just huge. I think it's, I don't know, tens of thousands of people that belong to their book clubs. And I think you can pick some mixture of mystery and romance. So some people maybe get like, 2 or 3 romances a month, maybe 2 or 3 mysteries a month. And then pick and choose, sort of like the old time, whenever you were like CD of the month club, where you got CDs that were sent to you. I belong to those, but they're still very, very popular for these books in Harlequin. And the books, especially romances, tend to be a little bit shorter than the average mystery. So you could really go through them, maybe if you're reading them in a day or two, pretty quickly. So people can ingest, multiple books within a given month. And as a result, I mean, from what I understand, Harlequin then simply needs more and more material to be able to provide for their very dedicated book club membership fan base. So, it's been great. I really like it because I just want more people to read the books. So in some ways, to me, the money or anything, whatever, but more people, when I see at Harlequin, like it's thousands and thousands, because they will send me what the distribution is. I get so excited because I can't believe that many people, in the past 3 months have actually gotten their hands on this book, which is just great.
I mean, and they, I'm sure they, because they're doing it in a mass market format, have it at a, reasonable entry point. And so people are, I think people really want to read new things and to learn about new authors, but, sometimes the price point, can prevent you from maybe picking up as many new authors as you would like. But if it's in a mass market format and it's being curated for you, which is something that a number of stores do as well, with their subscription programs, they'll curate, a subscription box for you of books that you've not read or authors you've not read. And it's just a great way to get introduced to authors that otherwise you might not have heard of that you could really enjoy. And especially if it's a series, like both of your books, if the person likes it, then they've got a whole raft of more books, to read. So, I think that's very cool. And I'm excited for you about that. So I guess Capital Crimes isn't going to be the White House Historical Association. There's not going to be anybody murdered there.
Well,
I guess I can't ask that. Sorry, I don't want to.
Well, you never know. I mean, it looks as though the title of the book is going to be Capital Crimes, but I think I'm going to spell it CAPITAL. Capital.
Oh, okay.
I thought it was
So there might be some United States Capitol in there, but there might be some other locations in the capital of the United States that make it into this book. I work in a very, very interesting house named Decatur House, which is right on the corner of Lafayette Square of the park, which is adjacent to the White House.
I didn't know that. That's important. Oh, wow.
That's where I work, and that's where my office location is. And it's
Nice.
I mean, it is just a perfect place for a murder. That's all I can say.
And Ellen, tell us I know you've got another one that's coming out in the next year. Tell us the title of that and when that's coming out.
Bitter Roots, and it'll be the 12th book in the series. Yes, the 12th. Yeah. It's coming out in Britain at the end of January and in America on April 5th.
Great.
Cool.
Yeah, and the paperback for French Paradox is coming out on September 28th. So.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just so excited for both of you to, be able to show off your books. And like I said, there was such wonderful symmetry having the two of you together for Ellen's launch and now for Colleen's new book. And I thank you for that because you're both so fascinating to listen to. And I just so enjoy. We have to here at the store decide who is going to introduce and do each of our virtual events. And I, immediately was like, oh, that was me. That's me. No chance for anyone else. That one's mine. I'm the owner. I get to do what I want.
Thank you.
So I just so appreciate you making the time to, to talk with us and to be available. I want to let everyone know in case you missed any of it, that these will be available up on our Facebook and as well as on our YouTube channel for people to be able to watch again in case you missed it. I see a nice little congratulations note there from Tara for you, Colleen. And anyway, congratulations. And we look forward to your new books and you'll just keep teasing us with little things about these books. I know.
Right. Mike's been here the whole time. We're dead.
Your new kitty.
Our new kitty. And he's thoroughly enjoyed. He sat quiet the whole time and just, I don't know if we saw, I could see in the and there, and he's right here. So he's enjoying. Yeah. Not just dogs, cats like it too.
That's true.
Yeah. So he knows we're talking about it.
Well, thank you both so much, and thank you everyone for tuning in to watch us tonight. And we look forward to seeing you soon. I think there is another. It's a cozy mystery event. I believe it's next Wednesday with Sherry Harris and a few other cozy authors, and I'm very much looking forward to.
That'll be great. I'm looking forward to Sherry's new book, her second series. She's got a series, which is really, really good. So
yeah, I really like the new series. So yeah, I don't know how she does it. I think she's doing both of them still.
Yeah.
And then she was president of Sisters in Crime a couple of years ago. She said to me, yeah.
So maybe we'll see some of you folks again next week.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye. Bye. Bye.